Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Implementing Sustainability Within Your Organization. My name is Linda Merchant Masonbrink with the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance here at Ohio EPA, and I will be moderating this panel discussion. First off, we have two panelists who will speak together here in one presentation. Keeland Logan is an entrepreneur and business owner committed to making Youngstown a leader in community-driven sustainable development. Mr. Logan is the founder of Emerald City, LLC, a sustainable development construction company dedicated to creating equitable stormwater management solutions. April Mendez is the CEO for Greenprint Partners, a green infrastructure project development and advisory firm that helps cities implement equitable, community-driven, multi-benefit stormwater solutions. She leads a national team of urban planners, engineers, community organizers, and finance professionals on a mission to get the most good out of green infrastructure. So, go ahead with your presentation, please.
Good morning. All right, so April, do you want to take the first slide?
Good morning, everyone. Excited to talk to you today about some work that Keeland and I have done together around developing a green stormwater infrastructure master plan and engaging the community around that master planning process in Youngstown. Back over to you, Keeland.
Perfect. So I was blessed enough to meet April Mendez back around 2016, 2017. It's been so much that's happened since then, it's kind of hard to keep track, but April and I were connected by Julius Oliver, who was the first ward city councilman at the time in the city of Youngstown. And as the executive director of the Colony Youngstown, a local grassroots community development organization, our mission was to engage, organize, and mobilize residents around important initiatives aimed at improving Mahoning Valley. So what's the short of that? How can we help make the community better? We were not very versed or very knowledgeable as to all of the true issues underlying Youngstown's problems, other than the obvious ones, crime and population loss. And so as I had the opportunity to connect with April, she began to kind of re-educate me as to some of the issues that face Youngstown, with it being a legacy city, with the population being 170,000 back in the 30s and slowly tapering off. And I kind of lived those facts. That data was kind of like my life story. And so I like to equate my life story to Youngstown's life story in the way that as a kid, I can remember there being more people, there being more resources, there being more going on. And, you know, things starting to, just become less and less. The schools were closing left and right. And you had businesses, closing down. Downtown Youngstown was a thriving almost metropolis at the time. I remember, department stores actually existing downtown. And just as the years passed, those things kind of disappeared. And, as someone growing up in my community, in the community I came up in on the south side of Youngstown, you don't make those connections. And so actually, finally, as an adult, a college graduate, actually meeting someone like April who could help me to connect some of that data, being population loss, industrial things, industrial organizations and companies leaving, and there being nothing left to, eroded and antiquated infrastructure that is impervious surfaces that contribute to, our stormwater issues, our environmental issues. And so as someone who grew up in Youngstown, also with, my family members, I have, many fond memories of Mill Creek Park with diverse groups of people, white people, black people, friends, cousins, all of those people. And then seeing and being made aware of the fish kills and all the things that were taking place as a result of our lack of stormwater management and ability to maintain and cope really hit me home. And it kind of reverse engineered our mission statement from there, which again is to engage, organize, and mobilize residents around important initiatives aimed at improving the community. And so this was something that was kind of tailor-made for our organization and for myself, and really took that on. And so, you know, the combined sewer overflows hit Youngstown hard. You know, Greenprint Partners in taking a green approach was really something that spoke life into our situation. To me, it read opportunity. And to many of the people that we were able to connect with, you know, through our community engagement workshops, our education and awareness initiatives, which included some pretty cool stuff like handing out over 2,500 towels at a Migos concert, you know, connecting with the demographic that typically wouldn't be made aware of these issues, but also very appreciative of that awareness, and hopefully being able to move into a space where we can help. So the Community First GSI Education Master Plan in Youngstown, we help to develop a plan by engaging residents where they are in schools, at the university, in community centers and libraries and different places, at festivals, just to make sure that people are aware and have the opportunity to contribute and add value to our planning phase by, you know, marking on maps where they notice some of the flooding and crime issues. So we started with community education, and that was just the very, very tip of the iceberg. And so in the interest of time, I would encourage everybody to take a look at our PDF, because the story isn't something that you can get through in 5 minutes. And I want to be respectful of the time that we have and everyone else's time, and allow you guys to, you know, visit the Greenprint's websites, Emerald City's websites, and just familiarize yourself with what actually took place. And if you have any questions, I'll be sure to answer any and all questions at a later.
Great,
So.
and I'll go ahead and hop in here. Keeland, and thank you so much for providing all the context on just how meaningful the challenges have been, and the opportunity, honestly, for some transformation for Youngstown through the way that the city chooses to address its combined sewer overflow challenge. So the context of the partnership that emerged between the Colony, Youngstown, and Greenprint Partners was around the combined sewer overflow that the city of Youngstown has been working on for quite some time addressing. And what we saw together was an opportunity to take a more sustainable green approach to that and use green stormwater infrastructure instead of solely a gray infrastructure strategy for implementation. And that was an opportunity to elevate so many additional co-benefits, community benefits for Youngstown, an opportunity to drive health improvements, to drive economic development improvements, to drive crime reduction, recognizing that the investment that needed to happen in order to reduce the fish kills in Mill Creek Park caused by the combined sewer overflow it could create so many more benefits for the city of Youngstown. And so the work that Keeland and I have done together is first around bringing this idea to the community, to say, you know, here's to educate people first about what green stormwater infrastructure is, what a green approach would look like, and ask whether this is something that you would in fact like to see in your neighborhoods. And so the planning process that we undertook was really to mobilize the grassroots community around making a decision about whether this is a direction that they wanted to move in. And so we first built a set of local partnerships. Our very first partnership was with the Colony, and that was a kind of coming together of a coalition of a formal partnership for the two of us to work together to implement this entire program. Then we created a peer action team, invited residents who thought, hey, this is really cool, something I want to learn more about. I'm potentially interested in helping bring this to Youngstown, or helping the community decide whether they want this in Youngstown. Trained those folks, took them on a tour of green stormwater infrastructure in Pittsburgh so they could feel what this kind of transformation might look like and think about how it applies to their own community. We established a stakeholder advisory committee and worked with local foundations to get funding for the education component of this work. And then we embarked on a really robust community education campaign, which Keelan gave you a few little insights into. We did a massive social media and media press push. Keelan talked about the rally towels that we distributed at the Migos concert. We launched this Green is Good, #GreenIsGood campaign. Across the city, had folks doing street education. We led a couple of green infrastructure tours for residents. And then the really most fundamental piece to this is we hosted a set of community workshops for over 150 residents in every ward of the city. Keelan aptly named it the Toured Awards. And in those workshops, we created a space for community authorship. So Keelan had mentioned, people were sitting around tables, standing around tables with maps on them, drawing out where they wanted to see green infrastructure, and specifically where they saw the benefits of green infrastructure integrating or intersecting with the other benefits that they wanted to see: crime reduction, flooding reduction, economic development, et cetera. And so they were helping us map out not just the data that we get sitting behind our desks, but the data that we get from accessing people's lived experiences. And so through that, the community selected a set of priorities that they wanted the Green Infrastructure Master Plan to focus on. There was kind of just an overwhelming yes, full-throated yes, this is something that we want to see in our neighborhoods. And here's what we want it to achieve for us. We want it to achieve more than just the stormwater management. And so ultimately, the plan that we have now intersects those community priorities with the opportunities for where green stormwater infrastructure can be placed across the city. So you see the maps that give you kind of an introduction to this. We're just finishing up phase 1 of the master planning process, and so there's more work yet to be done here, but we're anchoring this plan in the priorities that the community elevated as the ones that are most important to them, and leveraging the fact that there's a regulated need to address this combined sewer overflow challenge, and recognizing the level of investment that is going to happen in order to solve that problem as an opportunity to create even more good for the community. And part of that outgrowth has been the transformations in what workforce development is happening, and in Keelan's own work and participation in the marketplace around green stormwater infrastructure. And so for this, Keelan, I'll turn it back over to you to round us out on Emerald City.
Sure thing. Well, it's pretty simple. Our mission is to be a world leader in sustainable development. Now, that's a really far-reaching and rather ambitious mission, but I do recognize that it begins with the small things. All great things, all big things, all large things are comprised and made up of and sustained by smaller things. And so beginning with the first small steps, community awareness, engagement, planning and development, and then also just personal development, as people, as organizations, as companies, start to come into a more sustainable frame of thought. There's a need, and there will be continuous, kind of compounding of need to supply goods and services and goods that support and sustain sustainable living or sustainable development in general. So Emerald City has been created to not only exist in that space, but to grow and to thrive in that space, to take on more roles as we effectively and completely understand and master the levels beneath. And so we exist to service residents, governments, townships, businesses, anyone who wants to take a proactive approach towards sustainability from a stormwater perspective, and hopefully in the future, more sustainable perspectives, I would encourage you to reach out and let's grow together. Let's know together. Thank you. I know we're a little bit over time. Hopefully we've been helpful.
No, that's wonderful. Very interesting. And we really do appreciate that information you presented. Next up, we have Emma Tamlin. Emma is a food systems and green infrastructure strategist. Her work focuses on edible green infrastructure, urban farming models, and the development of supportive policy. She works with clients such as architects, developers, and municipalities to ensure projects and programs maximize ecosystem services and address social inequities. Take it away, Emma.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emma, and I am one of the co-founders of Raised Roots Consulting, which is a Toronto, Ontario-based urban agriculture operations and food systems consulting company. And so I'm here today to talk about urban agriculture and food system solutions. All right. So we started Raised Roots because we saw 4 main problems with our food system that we wanted to try and solve. So one being resilience. Our cities are sort of at risk when it comes to supply chain disruptions. Where I'm from, Toronto, we only have about 3 days worth of fresh food before we run out. So in the case of COVID, where everything got bought up really quickly, it sort of makes you think, what if that were to happen to food? How long would the food last in the city? The next is aging farmers. So 80% of North American farmers will retire in the next 10 years. This is a stat that's true for both Canada and the US, so North America wide. And the stat is actually already 5 years old. So in the next 5 years, we're going to see quite a volume of farmers start to retire. And what will that do to how our food is grown and who grows it? It's going to be a pretty big change. The next is lack of nutrients. So vegetables actually have about a quarter of the nutritional value compared to what they had 50 years ago. And this is due largely to a decrease in soil health, as well as how far food has to travel to get to your plate, because vegetables like spinach can actually lose more than 50% of their nutritional value within just 24 hours, and often foods can take up to 2 weeks to get to your plate. Next is climate change. So our food system is responsible for 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, and that happens all the way across the food value chain. So from the planting, harvesting, processing, transportation, refrigeration, and the waste as well. It's a pretty big chunk of our greenhouse gas emissions. So what Raised Roots sees is a solution to use urban agriculture and the food system in general as a solution to some of these challenges. So urban agriculture, we really want to incorporate food production into the urban environment to help shorten supply chains and grow food closer to the consumer. Sustainable supply chains, we really want to support the transition to traceable and equitable supply chains, because there are quite a few injustices along the supply chain on how our food is grown and harvested, and those who process our food and sell us our food. Next is education and training. Food literacy is really important. There's some kids that look at the mini carrots in the bag and think that's how they are. They don't know that carrots actually come out of the ground, and that's just an important aspect to understanding food and how it relates to you and your community. And also farmer training. Given what I said about 80% of Canadian farmers and US farmers retiring in the next 10 years, we really need to focus on increasing farmers to help feed the next generation. And food policy. So we want to work with all levels of government to adopt a food systems approach, which means really looking at how you can support urban agriculture, food justice within all departments of the city. And those are kind of like that's our approach to targeting some of the issues within our food system and the environment. And so our goal is to reconnect people with their food, train the next generation of farmers, and strengthen local community food security, health, and resilience through urban food production. So if you don't know what urban agriculture is, it can actually be a whole wealth of things, some of which are probably in your own community or even your own backyard. So it's any sort of food that's grown in the urban environment, could be a community garden, orchards, food forests. My personal favorite are rooftop gardens. They're a really exciting space to be, as well as urban hens, beekeeping. Some people are even harvesting insects in urban areas. So it can be a whole variety of ways, but it all comes back to growing food within an urban area. So what are the benefits of urban agriculture? Well, there are quite a few, more than just what are listed here. So food security, urban agriculture helps provide access to local, nutritious, and culturally appropriate foods within the community. It helps create jobs through commercial farms, universities, nonprofits, and charities. It helps reduce food miles because on average, food travels over 2,000 kilometers before it gets to our plates. Education, it creates opportunities to teach how food is grown, how to cook it, how it makes us feel, all of those like food literacy, farmer training. Community, so it increases community cohesion. Communities come together through urban agriculture, either at community gardens. Some parks have like pizza ovens where communities can gather and use some of the produce that they've grown to create these pizzas. It's really nice. And resilience. So it reduces carbon emissions compared to conventional agriculture, but it also helps manage stormwater, improve air quality, supports mental health and well-being, just by being close to nature. So one of the things that I like to focus on is connecting green infrastructure and urban agriculture, because we're seeing a trend across cities. This has already taken place in a lot of European cities, but now coming to North America, where cities are starting to implement green infrastructure policies. So, mandating green roofs, incentivizing rain gardens, all those things. But what's being left out of the discussion often is urban agriculture, and cities are not connecting the two, because there's opportunities where green infrastructure is incentivized or mandated. There's opportunities there to include urban agriculture. And there's policies that are really lacking this, but there's a huge opportunity to connect the two. My favorite example is trees. So trees in most cities already have a policy in place. So in Toronto, we have lots of grant programs to help homeowners plant trees. But we also have a stormwater policy that's being developed that includes trees as a way to manage stormwater, but it doesn't include fruit trees. And so this just relates back to having that food systems approach in policy, because you can manage stormwater through trees, but if you were to plant fruit trees, well, you also are improving food security, but there's an aspect of job creation as well. The fruit trees, the fruit can be gathered and then distributed through local community organizations, such as an organization in Toronto called Not Far From the Tree, where the fruit is gathered and it employs a number of people. And that's just one way that taking green infrastructure to the next step with urban agriculture has the opportunity to solve more challenges than just green infrastructure, which is really exciting. All right, and that's a quick overview of what we do, and that's my contact information. And so, I look forward to chatting with some of you in the questions.
Thank you so much, Emma. That's really fascinating, and I think we have an opportunity for cross-pollination here between some of the different panelists representing here on this panel. Next, we have Justin Milam. Justin helps lead the City of Upper Arlington sustainability initiatives. He serves on MORPC Sustainability Advisory Committee and MORPC Sustainable 2050 team, and recently led the update to the Central Ohio Regional Sustainability Agenda and the creation of a regional sustainability dashboard to track the region's progress. Okay, Justin, you're up.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, and great job to Linda, Keelan, and Emma before me. Really inspiring to hear their stories. And I'm here to talk about implementing sustainability in your organization. And I'm going to walk through just a couple of different tiers. We hear a lot from different communities and businesses on we don't know where to start, or we're kind of stuck and we're trying to figure out our next steps. And I think Keelan said it perfectly when he said the small things really add up to big things. And I think that's very critical, especially in local government for sustainability. And then also tying in from the Crystal Davis keynote yesterday, she mentioned, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but something along the lines of, it doesn't make sense unless the dollars make sense. So I think that's really important when you look at a lot of different things moving forward in the sustainability area. So real quick about Upper Arlington. So we are a suburb just next to the city of Columbus in central Ohio. We're on the doorstep of Ohio State University. We are a Tree City, USA. For almost 30 years, maybe 40 years. We have a high ethic of conservation. We have one of the highest recycling rates in really even in the state. We were just recognized as a Ohio EPA E3C communities member. And then our city council recently established a goal to become zero emissions and zero waste by 2030. Pretty ambitious, but we're working hard to achieve that. So real quick, here's some of the easy steps to go green. Hopefully a lot of businesses and local communities are doing this already. So forming an internal green team, kind of looking at processes and different resources that you have to figure out some ways that you can kind of reduce your footprint, and then also working with residents in your community groups to advance some of those missions forward. Building audits and energy audits, those are huge. There's so many organizations out there that'll come and do this for you and then help you implement some of those opportunities that are there. And those opportunities a lot of times include HVAC updates, plumbing updates, converting lighting systems, and those kind of things. Those are some kind of the low-hanging fruit that you hear about. But then also you're looking at your codes, your building code, your zoning code, your operations standards and manuals, just looking to see what you can allow. I know Emma mentioned a lot about urban agriculture, so allowing rain barrels, rain gardens, compost bins, those are some of the easy things. Solar panels. I know we allow solar panels on the front of houses, and since we've done that, it's kind of exploded here, and it's been just so great to see. And then you always want to promote an effort of conservation in your community through different events and just reminding the public on kind of what's happening. So next, somewhat easy. So looking where you're buying your energy from, trying to buy it from renewable sources if you can. The cost of kind of 100% wind or 100% renewable has come down. It's pretty competitive to typical non-renewable sources. So something to definitely take a look at. Composting has been huge here, especially in Central Ohio. So definitely start to take a look at that if it's a pickup or drop-off program. EV charging stations and green fleets, that's been taken off as well. A lot of information that is out there. Same with bike sharing. And then online permitting. You know, here in Upper Arlington, we try to be paperless. We only have paper coming in for building permits, and we're slowly getting away from that. So a lot of great programs out there. So really encourage governments to look at online permitting. And then we got PACE programs. Hopefully everyone's familiar with PACE. So Property Assessed Clean Energy is where you can finance basically your energy improvement projects through property taxes with an assessment on there. We just launched a commercial program for a big $100 and some million development project that we have, and we're going to launch a residential one here soon. Sidewalk incentives and shared use paths, those, you know, obviously super important to have those alternative modes of transportation. Then looking at energy on your facilities. And then green purchasing and anti-idling, these get kind of tricky because one, there's not a lot of green kind of products that are out there. Sometimes they are more expensive, but if you do your homework, you can find those. And then the anti-idling policy, make sure you talk to your police and fire departments about that. Make sure they're on board because they like to be ready for any kind of emergency. So all those things I've mentioned are things that Upper Arlington is doing. I have a website link at the end of this slide, at the end of this presentation here, so you can take a look at all those things and more. But I really wanted to showcase what we're doing next, because we are doing a ton. So we have a sustainability section in our master plan. We're going to be updating that here in the next year or two. We're going to be working with the Ohio State University to look at our emissions and waste and how we get to zero by 2030. Right now, we're looking at a recycling audit. We started seeing issues with how our recycling was collected and disposed of, so we want to make sure that's right. We've put some money aside for facility improvements, for lighting and HVAC improvements. We are updating a green toolkit that we have for our residents that have incentives and other things in there. We're going to create a green standard for new development and homes. Right now, we for big projects, every big project that we've had since 2008 has been eligible for LEED. We like the eligibility as opposed to requiring it. We'd rather see the money put into the building and into the site on that. As I mentioned, we're going to launch a residential PACE program. And then there's a couple other programs down there. We're looking to join CDP Cities, Power Clean Future Ohio, and People for Bikes. So I went through that really quickly. Again, my name is Justin Milam. I'm a senior planner with the City of Upper Arlington. And then if you go to tinyurl.com/greenua, you can get to our sustainability website with a lot of great stuff on there. So appreciate your time today. And Linda, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Justin. Wow. That's a lot of information, very little bit of time. I lived in Upper Arlington for many years, so I'm really proud of what the city's doing now. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a question we're going to pose to each of the panelists, followed by a poll and questions from the audience. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane. We'll do our best to answer any of those questions, but if you don't get an answer to the question during the Q&A portion, we'll reach out to you via email following today's webinar. So the question we would like to ask each of the panelists is, what was the spark that initiated your efforts? So April and Keeland, we'll start with you. What was the spark that initiated your efforts?
Thanks so much for the question, Linda. I'll go ahead and kick us off. So the spark for us was looking at the City of Youngstown's long-term control plan. So, you know, as we talked about in the presentation, the city has the combined sewer overflow challenge, and they had developed a long-term control plan that was mostly a gray infrastructure approach. And there was a nod to a need for a green infrastructure approach plan, but that wasn't going to happen for another 15, 20 years. And so we looked at the opportunity to potentially flip that and bring the planning process for green infrastructure up further in the timeline, so that the city could be more proactive about leveraging the investment that is going to be made over the next 20 years in a way that creates even more benefits for the community. So it was particularly critical to look at the fact that the city was making this big investment. I think this is, you know, the thing that I would recommend as a place to start is look at your existing investments. Where are you already planning to do large scale projects? Where are you already planning to invest a significant amount of money? And then ask, are there ways that we can do this that generate more benefits for the community that we're serving? And what would it take for us to even get our heads around what that could look like, what the opportunity of it would be, so that we can make an effective decision about whether we're prioritizing those additional community benefits and opportunities for sustainability through the strategy.
Great. Keelan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that pretty much was it.
Summarize it?
The one thing I would like to just reiterate is that it was our city council and Councilman Oliver that made the recognition that in connection to organic people, you know, from the source, which would be Greenprint, as far as the plan and education and awareness. One of the sparks was that. I would have to give that credit.
Okay, thank you. Emma, what was the spark that initiated your efforts?
Well, there's definitely a number of different sparks, but I think sort of one of the first ones happened well before I was even involved in the industry, when the City of Toronto adopted a green roof bylaw that mandated buildings over 2,000 square meters install a green roof. And so this made Toronto a real hub for green infrastructure, and also allowed a couple of rooftop farms to pop up within the city already existing. And then, of course, during COVID, the supply chain pressures on in the food system really pointed to the fact that Toronto is not a very resilient city when it comes to its food system. And so I really liked green roofs, and I really like urban agriculture, and I wanted to combine the two because I think rooftop gardens are a really great solution, and that's sort of where Raised Roots focuses a lot of its efforts on, is rooftop gardens and converting green roofs into productive food producing spaces. And so those are it was definitely COVID, but then also having the policy in place in Toronto has made it a little bit easier to work within the current policy infrastructure, but there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of getting food into other policy departments as well.
Great. Justin, what was the spark that initiated your efforts?
Yeah, so Upper Arlington has always been a pretty engaged community. We've had several different green groups that have kind of morphed over the years, but I think the main spark was going back to 2006, I want to say, there was a Central Ohio Green Pact that was put together by all the mayors, and that was kind of led by the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. And from there, it really we were able to team up with other communities and kind of work together to kind of raise all ships and get us kind of in a good direction to be a more sustainable community and region when you look at it all together. And each of those had a lot of input from local community groups and residents, kind of ground up to really help the local community. So that's really a really positive thing in the past.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you for your responses to that. The next thing we're going to do is have our second poll for the audience. Okay, so what we'd like to know is, why do you implement sustainability within your organization? And please select all that apply. Whether it be continuous improvement, cost savings, employee stakeholder morale, environmental benefits, or you don't know because you're just starting. Okay, the votes are coming in, and let's get the rest of the votes in so we can close the poll. Okay, it looks like we have most of the votes in, so let's see what we came up with. Okay, so it looks like a vast majority are interested in continuous improvement, 72%, with, well, actually, no, it looks like environmental benefits is 81%. And then cost savings, 59%. Employee stakeholder morale, 40%, and you don't know because you're just starting, which is fine. That's 5%. So, so it's not bad to be starting. You got to start somewhere. So.
I love that answer, though.
Yeah, well,
I mean that answer and the environmental benefits.
Right, but they're interested. They're interested. So this is
right. That's the point.
That's exactly right. Okay, so now we're going to take questions from the audience. And so please continue to put your questions in the Q&A pane so we can get those addressed by our panelists. Okay, I think I'll ask a few questions while we're waiting for people to chime in. How do you keep your participants excited and engaged in the process? And I'll just open that up for any of you who'd like to chime in.
I'll go if nobody's. So anyway, what I realized and what I think we collectively realized with our action team was that meeting people where they are is one of the better ways to keep people interested and engaged. What better way than to get someone interested in to go somewhere where they are interested or include things that they are interested in, and finding things on broad scale, kind of overarching levels. As one of my good friends and mentors says, flying at 60,000 feet. Those activities and those things tend to yield a better net than, let's per se our agenda. No one really understood or cared what green infrastructure was, but when you attach it to things like EGOs and you attach it to organizations like the YMCA and Youngstown State University, places and things that are near and dear to people's hearts or their life missions, it tends to connect a little bit more. And as I was alluding to with that one statement, was that people are generally, in general, I think, good-spirited and well-intended. And when you can connect with people at those levels, it just, I think, has a stronger bond. Is there anybody else? Sorry, I'm kind of long-winded there.
Yeah, Keelan, I agree with you on that. And I think another thing too would be just simply listening to, your resident groups, your residents in general. I know that, your ideas, you want to lead someone somewhere, but sometimes the best ideas, come from your residents. I know, for example, we did a capstone project with Upper Arlington's high school's student environmental group a couple years ago, and they pushed us to revise all of our ordinances to encourage pollinator-friendly plants and native plants and a whole lot of other things that we just didn't have in the code. We were doing, but it just wasn't in the code. So between that, and I know another example is we put out a map for people to identify possible bike share stations that may make sense to them, and we were able to take that information and ultimately implement it. So listening is obviously, I think, number one.
And I would add to that being intentional about who you're trying to engage, even before you get to the question of how you keep people engaged, is such a critical question. And in the sustainability field, there's a whole host of usual suspects, and those are the same folks that always show up to the planning meetings, always do the public comment. They're paying attention to the planning processes. Though that's a small, concentrated group of people that yields quite a bit of power because they know how to engage, they have access to engaging, they understand these ideas, they've been educated in them, et cetera. And so I think a fundamental flip that we were attempting to create in the work that we were doing together in Youngstown was to first start with the most disengaged communities and reach out to them, go into those communities and say, here's what's happening. Is this something that you want to be a part of? Is this something that you want to learn more about? Here's how it is relevant to your day-to-day life. And that's what birthed the partnership with Kieland and the Colony. Kieland had already built this grassroots social infrastructure within within neighborhoods, both through his organized community organizing effort, but also, Kieland as Kieland, growing up in Youngstown, being part of the community of Youngstown. Everybody in Youngstown knows Kieland. You walk down the street with him and you can't hold a conversation because he's always like, hey, 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 everyone is talking with him. And so it's recognizing the value in what Kieland has built, and saying this is the foundation for how we are going to change business as usual around sustainability. It is to honor and value the expertise and the wisdom within that's already been built, and not try to come in and rebuild something ourselves. So really starting with flipping the script on who is at the table, and it takes effort, and it takes a different way of approaching our strategies. So one of the things Greenprint is working on right now is in partnership with the Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange, an equity framework for centering equity in green infrastructure work. And the most fundamental principle of that framework is to change the way that you do business, to put community at the center of the way that your programs and policies and projects are being developed.
Thank you. It kind of leads into the next question, and maybe you partially answered that here, April, but what are your top 3 pieces of advice for starting and maintaining the sustainability program? And again, anybody can chime in.
Would you mind repeating the question, please?
Sure. What are your top 3 pieces, or 1 or 2 pieces of advice for starting and maintaining a sustainability program?
I would say, without a doubt, beyond, one of the most paramount things to focus on would be people. If you're a business, it has to affect your employees more positively. The beautiful thing is with sustainability is extremely synergistic, meaning that your outputs are your inputs, if not directly, indirectly. So something that Justin said earlier, you alluded to rising tides, raising all ships. That is what sustainability does. And so I think that the cliche statements are the truest and the most tried. At the core of any great movement thing or whatever is people. And so the environment is a part of us. We are a part of the environment. It gave birth to us as a species. And so that being said, keeping people and the environment at the core and really benefiting and enjoying the fruits of sustainable efforts and plans would be one of the core things that I will put, and I'll end it there.
Great.
I would add that.
Oh, sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would add that, just kind of keep a good spirit and don't try to get too overwhelmed, because there's so many different ways you can go. Start with things you could accomplish, and try to think of some of the bigger projects kind of in the back of your mind, and find a good team, even if it's, if it's just yourself or if it's you and another person. Try to find people you either work with or in the community that can help you kind of accomplish those things, and just try to keep moving forward, keep things fresh, keep people involved and updated. I think those are all positives to kind of keep moving forward.
I was just going to add in making it relevant, making sustainability relevant to the goals that matter to people. So kind of bridging off of what Kieland was talking about. Putting people at the center, understanding what matters to them, and thinking about a sustainability strategy that addresses those goals and is actually couched in those goals, framed in those goals, so that it becomes much more sticky. You gain the political will around it. You gain community support around it. You gain community support for continuing to fund it. All of those pieces are necessary. So, articulating, if the key goals in the community are addressing health inequities, for example, let's talk about health, and let's talk about how sustainability, let's figure out how our sustainability strategies can help advance health outcomes. if our big goal is economic development, let's talk about economic development, and then back into what are the sustainability strategies that we can achieve that will help to move the needle on economic development.
Great. Sounds good. Another question here. Who are the key community leaders to approach for enlisting their assistance in developing green infrastructure in communities, and who were your biggest supporters?
Keelan Logan.
You have to have somebody with a lot of personality and outgoing and.
Yep. And then Keelan was able to say, okay, you know, also, and this person and this person and this person, and pull together the folks who, you know, who had the ear of the community, had the respect of the community. And we just grew from there. Healthy things grow. So invest in what's already healthy.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes to mind is not trying to reinvent the wheel. There are most likely there are groups of people within any community that have a vested interest, that have a pure heart, and are well-intended, maybe need help identifying, or maybe just have a infrastructure that you can benefit from. And what comes to mind for me is the Healthy Community Partnerships that is supported by our Mahoning Valley Community Foundation, headed by Sarah Lowry, who has the Parks and Green Spaces Action Team, a healthy food supply action team, as well as, I believe, infrastructure. There's utilities, something else that I don't want to mess up. But anywho, connecting with groups like those, connecting with homeowner associations like Northeastern Ohio Homeowners Association, connecting with the kind of boots on the ground to mid-level management type of people, how I would define it in a corporate sense, but we're talking about mothers, fathers, children, students, like high school age students, adolescents, their coaches, their teachers, their pastors, you know, those people who actually make up the general body of society. And the leaders of society, good leaders of society, kind of get in line with that body as a whole, and kind of, you know, by default, just play the role that they necessarily must play in order to create a greater impact and a better, more positive impact for everyone. And so that would be who, if I had to define our supporters, it would be that. And there's a plethora, a myriad of people who exist within that space. I named one, I'll stop with one, that way.
Okay, anybody else? We do have a lot of questions here. We're not going to be able to answer all of them, but they will be answered after the webinar is over. I think we have time for one more quick question here. Has the City of Youngstown adopted any new policies or tactics to deal with stormwater in new and innovative ways?
There hasn't been an adoption yet of any new policies, but there has been an elevation of the policy discussion across the number of stakeholders who are the ones who are going to make those more influential decisions. So not yet, but keep tuned.
Okay. Okay, well, there are quite a lot of other questions here, but I think we're going to have to go ahead and close here for now. But those of you who did not get their questions answered, they will be, so just hang in there and you will receive a response to your question. So I want to thank all the panelists for participating today and all the wonderful information presented to give us all some wonderful ideas and how we might consider sustainability within our own communities. And thank you for everyone who's attending the webinar today. Once you leave, you will receive a survey, and we will value your feedback and greatly appreciate it if you let us know how we're doing and to let us know if there's anything we can do to further assist you. A certificate of attendance will also be emailed to you. Join us later today from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock for our next panel focusing on sustainability tools to track, measure, and quantify your journey. With that, we'll end this webinar. Thank you again for joining us and have a great day.